Greetings, fellow crafters and VBS directors. This is Nicole with part 3 of creating an underwater coral scene, crafting for VBS. I have a few fun things to show you today. I don't have the sea urchin craft yet. I'll have to do that a little later, but I wanted to show you what I have for today. Another fun craft coral object that you don't need to do any crafting with is a loofah. You can buy a couple fun colors, stretch it out nice and big, make it kind of floof a little bit more, and you can kind of create yourself a fun coral with no crafting ability at all. A fun addition, depending on what your skill level is a loofah. So I wanted to show that to you. So today for fun crafting corals, I have two types of objects that are bunched up items that are really fun grouping, and two that are really fantastic standalone pieces that if you just take the time to do one or two of them will really stand out in your coral underwater scene if you have the opportunity or skill set to do a few of them. So let's first start off with the grouping ones. So I wanted to show you today what you can do with pool noodles to make some kelp pieces. I didn't initially have pool noodles because we didn't have them here in Southeast Alaska. They just recently showed up. So I'm enjoying being able to carve the pool noodles into some kelp. But before I had that, I had Home Depot's pipe insulation pack. Now these are relatively cheap. It's I think roughly $3 and some change for a 4-pack of 1/2-inch insulation. I don't exactly remember the pricing, but these you can spray paint and make fun kelp just the same. So I wanted to show you roughly what I did. And this is just one pool noodle you can do making the kelp. You're going to want to cut your insulation pipe or your pool noodle, not necessarily in half. If you have multiple pieces, you want to kind of change up their length so each one of them is a different length, so you can kind of offset for taller ones or shorter ones in half with just a pair of scissors, not your nice pair of scissors of course. Then use a pair of box cutters, and with the small 1/2-inch you're just going to want to do 2 pieces. With the large pool noodles you can actually do up to 4 pieces. So what you're going to want to do is not cut too deep on the initial to start kind of carving on where you want to go with this. So you just want to work yourself back and forth in a wave-like pattern to kind of gauge where you want to go with this. And then you're going to want to do the same thing on the opposite side, keeping in mind on where you cut on this side and kind of keep in line with that same pattern, and then go back over it to cut it out. And once you have it completely cut out, like I have with this particular piece, you'll notice it looks pretty jagged on the inside of your pool noodle or insulation. At which point I just take a pair of scissors and I take the time to clean it up. I take those jagged inside pieces and just cut them flat, basically shaving them down or molding it into the kind of the shape you want it to be. Not quite carving with scissors, but you kind of get the idea. And that kind of softens those edges up, and it will look really nice, just like this set of kelp I have on the display here. So the next craft I have, as I mentioned before, plastic bottles. Now, depending on whatever size you have, you roughly want to cut off with a pair of box cutters the bottom portion of the bottle and save that for later, as I'm still hoping the pipe cleaners will show up in the mail. I have an idea to craft for the bottom one, so save those, don't throw them out just yet. So taking the top portion, removing the film, don't worry if it's sticky. If it's super sticky later, you can add some sand to it. That just adds some fun texture to your quote-unquote sponge that you don't really need to worry about getting some gooby gone and removing all that sticky. So just leave the sticky there. It's not going to hurt anything. So just remove the label. Now from that, your bottle, I took a heat gun that I had in my shop, and I just gently, slowly rotated the bottle and heated it up, and it kind of bubbles and warps the bottle into what the sponge will end up being. If you don't have a heat gun, I have not yet tried other methods yet. I don't know if a hairdryer gets hot enough or holding over a candle is advisable or not. I haven't tried it yet. But with this method, I used a heat gun. But go ahead and, you know, give it a shot. See what you got, see what works. So once you have melted your bottles down, roughly, you're going to take a piece of foil, just a square, and fold it over twice. Once, twice. This gives it a little bit of thicker surface to work with. Now you want to have it concave slightly when you put the foil on top to give it some depth to it. So when you set your foil in, being gentle not to rip it, you're going to press it down and work it in the middle of your bottle a bit, just to concave it down. And once you've got it, you know, somewhat concaved into your bottle, then you could start pressing it against the edge and folding it over and working it over the side of the bottle. And once you get that, slowly work it around. Once you get that rough shape, really just press into it and work it, and then about 1/2 inch, you can use your nail, you can just really press it down to get that about 1/2 inch down the bottle really set tightly against the bottle. Then you're going to want to go back and with a sharp blade, not the dull one I have here currently, but you want a nice sharp one, you're going to want to score it down below along the foil to remove that excess along the bottom for your sponge. And once you do that, you're going to want to take your hot glue gun and take a real liberal amount and go over that edge, that outer edge of your foil, making sure it makes contact with the plastic bottle to create that seal, to get that nice dripped lip that you have over the edge, to really hold that piece of foil to your bottle. If you don't do this and you just spray paint it with the foil as is, it's really obvious it's foil and it doesn't look quite right. I tried it, so take the time to put that little extra step and add that hot glue gun lip to your sponge. And that's the final look. So just tack on a little bit of hot glue, stick it on a piece of cardboard, and spray paint them up, and they will look great. And I especially love all the different heights of bottles, so save all of them, even your little vitamin bottles up to your shampoo bottles or drinking bottles. They look great. And then once you're done with them and you're ready to display them, you'll set them up all at various heights in a bunched group, and they will look fantastic. So those are my sponges with plastic bottles. The next two we've got here are some of my favorite. They do take a little more effort. So I have these, I don't know what you would call them, Seif fans, or yeah, I don't know, they're just beautiful corals. I don't know what the names of them are. But what I had is from a shop that was throwing out a bunch of old wire. I grabbed a spool of it. You can just grab wire wherever you can. And you're going to want to build your frame up with the wire. So here I have a cookie sheet to act as my thermal barrier. Some parchment paper to keep the hot glue from sticking. And then I made a wire tree. As if you look here, you can see I have a base. This is something I can duct tape down to the project I'm working on. So my cardboard boxes that are going to act as my rocks, this is something I could duct tape this sea coral to as my base, or the roots of this coral. Then I bent the wire up and create a couple tree branches up and down the length of what I'm going to do. So this is a fairly smaller one. So that creates like a structure that's going to hold it and allow it to stand up straight when I'm done with it. So the next thing I do is, with the hot glue gun, is I fill in that center to kind of create that nice thick trunk, basically, with hot glue, give it that sturdy structure. And then I start branching off from it like it were a tree, even with the hot glue. Doesn't have to have the wire there. And when I kind of have that baseline, I then decide in my mind's eye, what do I want my coral to look like? As you can see here, about an inch away from my wire, I kind of bended the outline of my coral. So I'm going to say roughly, okay, I want my coral to bend out here, I want a loop there, I want it to come back, and kind of create that edging of where I want my coral to be. And then from that, I take my branches and I connect to that line with my hot glue gun. Just roughly like a tree, reaching that end point. And then once those main ones are established with my hot glue, then I just fill in the center with a bunch of small ones, back and forth. It would help if I add another glue stick to my hot glue gun. Back and forth, like a spider's web almost. It's okay if it gets thick, it just means when you spray paint them, it'll have more color to it. So I am going to let that dry now for this tinier piece. And then later, it'll peel easily off the parchment paper with no problem. I'll flip it and then I'll fill in any of the gap along the trunk portion of my wire, because there'll be some air gaps where you don't have the hot glue. Fill that in and then you're done. And then you can set this up, duct tape it down a little bit, and spray paint it with whatever fun colors you want it to be. And these look really great, and the fact that they're see-through just adds another factor to it. So that is a very fun coral I absolutely love. And the last one, woo, let's knock this over, put it right behind me for now. Okay. This last one is very similar, but this is paper mache. And to be honest, haven't done this since I was like 10 years old, but I had a lot of fun with it. This is a small example of one of the corals you'll see here in a minute, with a sneak preview of what I'm building outside of my backyard, of a really beautiful coral with paper mache. So what you're gonna need here is ideally some sort of pan that you can throw out when you're done. This used to hold croissants. It worked out just as fine. I also use the lid on a different day. It works great. I don't have to worry about it afterward. So find a throwaway tray. You can use I've seen people use a pie tin as an example. So for those of us who can't cook, you're gonna want to grab the half a teaspoon measurement, and you're gonna want 3 half teaspoons of salt. For those of you who know measurements, that's half a tablespoon. I didn't know that, so my sister kindly explained to me that's 3 half teaspoons of salt. You're gonna want 1 cup flour. Now some people use glue for theirs. This, for the corals, you actually like it chunky. You like it having a little bit of texture to it. So the flour actually works great rather than the glue that's a lot more smooth when you're done with the product. So 1 cup flour, and then 1 cup water. Now you're gonna wanna wear gloves for this and have a fork ready so you can mix this all up. Now with that one set of mixture, that lasts me about 1 hour to get through it all, that set of mixture. So be prepared for that. And you're also gonna want your paper clippings already pre-cut before you start this project. So I cut them roughly into 1-inch strips, and I had this this friend that has a lot of shipping coming and going, and they had a lot of extra packing material that come in that they didn't need, they were gonna throw out. So I was able to get a hold of a bunch of packing paper, and what I did is I folded it nice and flat, these huge sheets, folded them over multiple times to make it a lot easier to cut it into strips. And honestly, I found that the thinner the strip, like this was actually too thick. The thinner the strip, the better, and ripping them up into smaller pieces made this a whole lot easier, I found along the way. But that is the one part of it. But first, making the structure, very similar to what we talked about with the sea fan thing. The coral portion, you're actually going to want to make 3D. You're going to want it pointing in different directions. And what I used was I took little strips of small bubble wrap, and I wrapped it and then used just tape and taped it to create a structure I can then paper mache around for the coral structure. And this one is a new one I'm trying. I haven't done one like this yet, but I used a large bubble wrap for this particular coral. I'm excited to see how this one turns out because I haven't tried this kind yet. but I'm just using the bubble wrap for a shell so I can wrap my paper mache around it. I'm looking forward to how that turns out. So I will be showing that to you now, excuse me, outside. So come check out what I'm currently working on. Let's go. As I step over all my crafting stuff. Excuse the mess. So this is the rock structure I'm currently building. As you can see, I used a lot of spray foam. We'll talk about that in the next video. But these are the beautiful little sea fans I made. I really enjoyed them. One, this is like a medium size. Your wire is going to be plenty to hold this up. Now, if you want to do a larger one like this one here, absolutely gorgeous, but the wire alone is not going to be enough to hold this up. You're going to have to go to Home Depot or your local hardware store and get a thin metal wire rod that they have there, and just do one backing along the top and have it angle out like an L along the bottom to give it that strength to be able to stand straight up. Wire alone is not going to cut it, and by the way, it's going to take several hours to glue this all together. It'll take a minute. But this one here is my favorite coral. This is the paper mache one I was talking about with the bubble wrap core. Now I did this in a couple segments. I did one or two different paper maches along the top, and the last one the next day after it was dry, I flipped it upside down and I reinforced the bases of these arms because they're pretty heavy. So doing that reinforcement on the backside was really a good call for this coral structure, because I want this to last for future VBS decorations in years to come that have an underwater theme. So that's why I'm building everything hoping to last. And you can see my bunching here of the sea sponges with different sized bottles, even this cute little one that's saying save your vitamin bottles. They really help break up the different sizes of them. And this is an example of your spray paint version. Unlike the pool noodles, who are already green, this one is spray painted. It's not too bad. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this all turns out and showing you how I built this and how I plan to actually transport it. So until next time, talk to you guys later. Bye.